رب العالمين الحمد لله المنعم المتفضل الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. To all of those who are listening, whether it's on Zoom or on Facebook or on YouTube, special shout out to Mufti Riyas and also to Hamza, the Mufti of HRMC, and all the other Muftis who are with us. And Jazakumullah khair, may Allah bless Rawdah Trust for hosting this event. And inshallah ta'ala, we hope to make it a regular feature that we have as a fortnightly session where we have a chance to discuss the ultimate obligation, which is ilm al-halal wal-haram, knowing what's lawful and what's prohibited. That's what these discussions are about. قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Say, are those who know equal to those who don't know? Only those who have true intelligence will be able to understand. So it's about just sharing what we know from those who truly know. And this is all part of warathat al-anbiya. This is all part of our share of the blessed inheritance of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who left us this knowledge of right, of knowing what's right from wrong. And in learning this knowledge, we also need to take the warning of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right now we're in very dark times. Darkness has enveloped the world, where people have become so distant from the light of guidance of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are so many false messiahs, false claimants to the inheritance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But most are just nufus, most are just egos. And there are clear alamat, there are clear signs by which you can recognize who are the people of true guidance, from whom you can take prophetic guidance. إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. And so remember the statements of the great Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin, who said, truly this knowledge is religion, so watch where you take your religion from. So now that we're all living virtual lives, our lives are online, our lives are in social media, but it's a free-for-all. It's the worst. It brings out the worst in human beings, the gutter of human existence. So when people have moved into these gutters, then it's just about finding any beacon of light that's out there that will help us point back to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to be careful of being less misled. There are many that are online, many that have dominated social media, and there's an unfortunate aspect that the true people of prophetic guidance, they stay away from this. They stay away from it, but it's been occupied by people of misguidance. And so in such difficult, dark times, where recognizing who you can take from and who you can't take from your inheritance, the Messenger becomes so much more difficult. There's a need to engage. There then becomes a need to engage, and inshallah ta'ala, whatever little light is shared, ultimately comes from the barakat of our mashayikh. Ultimately, all of this is from the blessings of our mashayikh, from the blessings of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's all from the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever mistakes that are made, whatever ignorance that is showed, it's from the weakness of the ego and the mistakes of the soul. So inshallah, having said that, also don't forget the brilliant example of Sayyidina Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Medina, the Imam of the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for over 60 years, about whom it said, لا يفتى ومالك في المدينة, that nobody can give fatwa whilst Malik is in Medina. A man traveled from Spain to Medina with 40 questions. And of those, around 32 of them, Imam Malik said, I don't know. He said, I don't know. And so the man, what am I going to tell my people when I go back? He said, just tell them that Imam Malik said, I don't know. Just tell them that Malik said, I don't know. So ultimately, we remember وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above everybody of knowledge, there's someone who's more knowledgeable. We just share whatever understanding we've taken. Absolute knowledge is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and true knowledge and true guidance is only with the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So then beginning looking at the questions here, I will start from the top. So Anas, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the correct understanding of Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion? La riba bayna muslimin wa harbi fi dar al-harb. Does this mean interest is permitted in non-Muslim lands? What does this mean in terms of mortgages and interest saving bank accounts where the banks add money to the account over time? There's some differences amongst the Ahnaf, amongst the Hanafis over what exactly did Abu Hanifa mean by that. For those, just to clarify, so the statement of Abu Hanifa, لا ربا بين مسلم وحرب في دار الحرب. There is no riba, there is no interest between a Muslim and a non-Muslim in non-Muslim lands. That's the famous opinion of Abu Hanifa. What does that then, a practical application of that, what exactly does that then mean? Some Hanafis hold the view that's mutlaqan, both ways. You can receive interest from a non-Muslim, you can give interest to a non-Muslim. There are Ahnaf, there are Hanafis who hold that view. But generally most of the later Hanafis, and it's the firm view of my teachers, and it's the view that I pretty much always will mention, is that what Abu Hanifa here meant by this, it is not haram to receive riba from a non-Muslim in non-Muslim lands, but it remains haram to give. And the dala'il for this, there's quite detailed evidences for this. So based on the Imam's opinion, Imam al-A'zam, based upon the opinion that I understood from my teachers and just the view of most of the muta'akhirin, the later Hanafis, it means that mortgages remain haram. It means that student remain haram. But the other point, it means that you are allowed to receive interest saving bank accounts, and you are allowed to receive from a non-Muslim riba. Most of the ulama, even the Hanafi ulama here, however, do not make that as a general public fatwa. Most of them, so as not to cause confusion in the minds of people, are making a distinction between when is riba halal, when is it haram, because riba interest is one of the worst things that a Muslim can deal with. So for most, they will give the fatwa based on the opinion of the Sahibain, Abu Yusuf Imam Muhammad, and based opinion of the other three madhabs, that in all cases dealing with riba is haram. Wallahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. Naseem, can you use sadaqah jariyah to sponsor someone who doesn't have the means to study the Deen, e.g. to cover travel and course expenses? For Naseem, what exactly do you mean by can you use sadaqah jariyah? If you mean by that, can I use my money, which is sadaqah, with the intention that it's continuous sadaqah to sponsor the students of knowledge, then absolutely. It's one of the best of things that you can give sadaqah for. But if you mean, can I take somebody else's money, the sadaqah jariyah, and use it to sponsor somebody else? If you're taking somebody, as a general point, if somebody's giving you a responsibility of passing on their sadaqah, whether you're the masjid, you're involved in masjid or an organization, or just as an individual, somebody said, give this a sadaqah, then then it depends upon how that person's passed it over to you. If he's left it mutlaqan, if he's not given any details, so just give that as sadaqah, then you give it to anybody who's eligible to receive sadaqah. But if, as an example, there's a fundraiser for Syria, there's a fundraiser for Yemen, there's a fundraiser for a masjid, there's a fundraiser for madrasa, students of knowledge, that person said, give that money for that cause, you can only use it for that. You cannot use it for anybody else. You cannot then take upon yourself to decide who I'm going to give it to. And if you do that, then you're damin, then you're liable to replace that for that person. He gave you an amana, he gave you a trust, and you must fulfill his trust. Wallahu a'lam. Anonymous attendee says, can we leave negative feedback reviews publicly, i.e. online, for any service we've purchased? Is that allowed? If they've asked for it, generally leaving feedback is usually done where the service that you used, they've asked you for that. In that case, if they've asked you for it because they want to improve their service, then that's fine. Or if it's not in that case, if it's, for example, where there's a forum online where you can leave reviews, you have to be clear about your niyyah. You have to be clear about your intention. If your intention that you've received a bad service and you want to warn people about that, then that's a jaiz, and that's one of the cases where riba is allowed. That's one of the cases where speaking ill of others is allowed, even if it upsets them, is to warn people about them. Wallahu a'lam. Shaykh Thaqib, mashallah, marhaba. So Thaqib's looking to get married. MashaAllah. And Thaqib's asking the question for a nikkah, what makes it valid, what needs to occur, witnesses, presence, khutbah, dua, etc., etc. No. All that's needed for a nikkah to be valid, according to the opinion of Abu Hanifa, according to the view of Abu Hanifa, you need to have the two contracting parties. So man and a woman, and it has to be a woman. It has to be a man and a woman, or somebody representing the woman. So that's usually her wali, like her father, or it could be a wakil, somebody that she appoints. So the two contracting parties in the presence of two witnesses. And those two witnesses have to be Muslim. 2 males is the best, or 2 males and 1 female. And they have to make 2 statements. So he or she says, or he or the father says, I have married you, and the answer comes back, I've accepted, and that's it. That's the minimum requirements for it. So 2 contracting parties with the 2 witnesses present and the 2 statements that are made. Khutbah is sunnah, dua is sunnah, having a certificate is just for recording it. The mahar is a wajib. Mahar, the dowry, is a wajib, but the marriage will be valid without it. But the dowry, mahar is wajib. It's necessary to have that, but the marriage will be valid without. Imam is not needed. You don't need to have an imam. Often when I do nikkah, when I conduct nikkah, I'll count myself as one of the 2 witnesses. So myself, even though I'm conducting myself plus one of the witness, that's sufficient because the imam is not a requirement. The imam is just conducting the whole procedure. So Thaqib, mashallah, you're looking to get married. I'm sure you were married, weren't you? Where is Haroon Hanif? Here I am, whoever was asking. Alina, how can we help people in our family that have severe anxiety from COVID? She's recently come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during Ramadan, worked hard, but she still has anxiety. And there's a deeper issue with anxiety. And that's a person who by their nature, they worry a lot. They have a lot of stress within their minds and so on. You need to do some work about just talking to that person about hoping in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that they seem good. Like in dark times, always see good in the worst of all times. So in the tribulation that people are suffering right now, see good within that. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minal zalimin. Ask her to read a lot of that. وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين. Read the كلمة طيبة لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we saved Yunus alayhi salam. We answered him and we saved him, and in the same way we'll save him from his distress. And in the same way we'll save the believers. Wallahu a'lam. Is the Study Qur'ān a good English translation / tafsir to use and benefit from? I found it useful so far, but I've heard some people saying to avoid it. Do you happen to know what issues there are with it? It's a brilliant translation, but only people of knowledge should use it. It's a brilliant translation, perhaps the best one that there is out there. But unless you've studied Qur'an to a high level, don't touch it. The people who wrote it were perennialists, and perennialists are people who believe that all religions are equal pathways to God. And some of that comes through a defense of the Trinity, comparing it to the theological view that of the Ash'ari and the Maturidiyya, that Kalamullah, that the relationship between the uncreated and created word of God. Allahu A'lam. So there's some real problems in there, although it's probably the best translation, and I use it all the time. But I would strongly discourage it. Unless you study the Qur'an and you're firmly grounded in the Qur'an, don't touch it. The example of that, one of the best tafasir in Arabic, one of the best tafsirs of the Qur'an that exists in Arabic is al-Kashaf of Imam al-Zamakhshari. Imam al-Zamakhshari was a staunch, hardline Mu'tazili, a deviant. Imam al-Zamakhshari, staunch, hardline Mu'tazili. And when it comes to ayats in the Qur'an that speak on theological points of difference, he attacks Ahlus Sunnah of the Ash'ari and the Maturidiyya. He's strong in his attack against them. Yet the ulama of Ahlus Sunnah as a whole have used this tafsir because of the brilliance in language, and it truly is an amazing tafsir in terms of the discussions on language. It truly is an amazing tafsir, Kashaf. And any scholar of worth will refer to it. But the scholars who are able to distinguish what's the poison of what he says, and they'll answer it, they'll refute it. Like Tafsir al-Baydawi is a summary of that, removing much of the i'tizal, the deviancy within that. And then Tafsir al-Nasafi is a summary of that, and it's got rid of pretty much everything. But the ulama of Ahlus Sunnah have always used al-Kashaf as the Makhshid, even though he's a known deviant to attack the Ahlus Sunnah. So books like the Study Qur'ān should only be used by people of knowledge. Wallahu a'lam. Thaqib, what advice would you give to raise children in this day and age? Ya Rabb. Ya Rabb. It's the biggest fitna that there is for parents. How do you raise them? Never forget the power of dua, because dua al-walidain mustajab. Never forget the power of dua. Create that environment around you. Where they're exposed and raised in a home of iman, like an oasis of faith. Create the environments and make your homes into places of faith, into sanctuaries, into refuges of faith. And then after that, even after that, it's such a struggle because you cannot isolate yourself from the worst fitna of these times, the worst tribulation of these times. So at the end, وَأَصْلِحْ لِي فِي ذُرِّيَّتِي. أَصْلِحْ لِي فِي ذُرِّيَّتِي. Just keep on making dua to Allah subhanahu. جَعَلْنِي مُقِيمًا وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي. I keep on making dua to Allah subhanahu that He protects your children, that He raises them, that He lets them live and die as believers. And make dua for your children at all times, because your dua for your children is accepted. And we're in a time that's pretty much the only weapon that the believer has. But we should never forget, that's the most powerful weapon that the believer has, the power of dua. An anonymous attendee says, Assalamu alaikum, Salam. I'm 38 years old and I've regrettably been inconsistent with my salah, not praying for long periods of my life. Alhamdulillah, I'm now praying consistent and on time. Or how shall I make up or catch up with over 20 years of missed prayer? Jazakallahu khairan. Work out roughly how many you have to make up. Work out roughly how many you have to make up. 20 years is going to be a lot, and it's going to break your heart when you see the number. But you have a debt that you owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have a debt that you owe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prioritize that over everything. And even though, Allahu alam, if you follow the Hanafi madhab or you hold to a particular madhab, or when you have 20 years of missed prayers, take the view of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, and don't pray any sunnahs. Make all of your prayer qada. Prioritize that. The view of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, if you have qada, you cannot pray sunnah or nafil. So at the times where you would have prayed sunnah or nafil, then just pray your qada. And don't do anything but qada. And have a set time during the day where you get through an X amount of qada. And inshaAllah ta'ala, if you're sincere and genuine in doing that, even though it'll take you a while to do that, inshaAllah, Allah will make it possible for you. And He'll let you fulfill the most important duty that you have in your life. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, Allahumma la taqbid ruhi hatta adaytu kulla ma alayya. Allah, do not take my soul until I have fulfilled every single obligation that I owe you. Wallahu a'lam. An anonymous attendee, do we stay away from Ibn Taymiyyah's works? What are the things that we can take from him? Generally the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, generally the ulama of Ahlus Sunnah, most of them will just advise some care, just to be slightly careful with his works. Because Ibn Taymiyyah, afallahu anhu, and particularly in one or two issues in Aqeedah, there are some concerns. Some of the Asha'ira, some of the Imams that we studied Aqeedah with, they were quite staunch on that. One of my teachers, when I mentioned an opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, which is in fiqh, he said, Mali wa Ibn Taymiyyah. What have we got to do with Ibn Taymiyyah? We have nothing to do with Ibn Taymiyyah. We have our madhahib of fiqh, we have our madhahib of Aqeedah. Ibn Taymiyyah held certain views that went against the Hanbali madhab. And he criticized certain points on the Aqeedah of Ahlus Sunnah. So the safest thing is, unless you're firmly grounded in knowledge, then, as one of my teachers said, we have Imams about which there's no dispute. So take from them. Right? If you've exhausted all of the works of the Imams about which there's no dispute, and you have clear understandings of what's right and wrong in these matters, then there's no harm. But if you're taking Ibn Taymiyyah as a source of guidance, then there needs to be some care. Allahu a'lam. What are the roles and responsibilities of a husband and wife? They will be questioned about on the Day of Judgment if not fulfilled. And any clarity would be very beneficial for married couples and those looking to get married. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are maintainers over women. So the first duty, the highest obligation upon a man is to provide for his wife materially as well as spiritually. And spiritually is more important. A woman can go without in terms of food and drink and a home and so on. She can struggle through life with a husband with that. But if she's uneducated and he's not taught her anything, does not teach her about her belief, does not teach her Qur'an, does not teach her how to worship, does not teach her anything. أنت مسؤول. You'll be asked about your wife. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ. Order your family, order your wife, order your family to pray. So the first responsibility that the husband has towards his wife is the spiritual guidance. He's the Amir over his wife. He's the leader over his wife. He must take that responsibility deadly serious. Then at the same time, he must also fulfill his duty to provide for her, put food on the table for her, ensure that she's got a home, and so on. And also, along with that, the third thing, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُوهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them in a decent manner. I honor them, respect them. Honor them, respect them. Don't shame her, don't in front of other family members and so on. She's your wife, she's the mother of your children. So honor her and respect her. عسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا. Perhaps you dislike something about her, but Allah's put so much good within her. So honor her and respect her. فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, keep her with you in a good manner or release her in a good manner. Live with her in the best of manner, honor her and respect her. And if you don't get on, not just one or two problems, but it's got to a point where you just can't live, tasrihum bi, then end the marriage in a respectful manner. That's in terms of the husband. In terms of the wife, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهُ. Righteous women, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, are obedient. They will listen. They may well disagree with their husbands. They may well make their opinions known to their husband. But in the end, she recognizes he's Amir al-Bayt. That he's a leader in the home. Allah has made him that. He's given him that. So after everything, even though she may struggle and find it hard, she will accept his decisions, unless it's going into something haram or something that's clearly not possible. حافظات للغيب. And she'll also take care of anything that he owns, his wealth, his property, his home, in his absence, while he's out, while he's away. They're the duties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon the wife towards the husband. Anonymous attendee, salam Shaykh, wa alaykum salam. What is the rule on wearing the hijab? Is it fard? Absolutely it's fard. Absolutely it's fard. And there's not even a question about that. You have ayat in the Qur'an. قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن. يا أيها النبي, O Prophet, say to your wives, starting with Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the women of the believers, the mothers of the believers, and your daughters, say the Fatima, say the Ruqayya, say all of these blessed women, tell them, and tell all the believing women, after your wives and after your daughters, tell all the believing women, يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبٍ. Like cover yourselves. Cover yourselves. You have the ayah in Surah An-Nur that also mentions that. وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. Don't go out displaying yourself, like wearing makeup and spraying all types of perfume, just trying to draw attention and men towards you. Allah says, speaking to the wives of the Prophet first, don't go out displaying your beauty in the manner of the first age of ignorance, al-jahiliyyat al-ula. So it's absolutely categorical that wearing the hijab is fard. There's nobody historically who's ever said otherwise. We live in weird times now where you can hear everything. You'll come across every type of opinion. Well, if anybody's saying it's okay for a woman not to wear hijab, there's a danger with that person's iman at that point. If a woman's like new in her faith and struggling with her faith and so on, right, that's not just about hijab. Like somebody's an alcoholic, just give him some space and find himself in his religion. Like give people time to develop within their religion, but that doesn't change the obligation of the hijab. Wallahu a'lam. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. Mufti Majin. Okay, the in-law question. We've got a couple of in-law questions. So, a sister asked a question. I live with my in-laws and I hate it. Me and my husband moved here temporarily until we have enough for our own place. I know this is a test and I need to be patient. What exactly does Islam say about a woman living with her in-laws, especially whilst there are other non-mahrams living under the same roof as you? I am mentally exhausted due to the expectations and Chinese whispers. Islamically, what are the duties that a daughter-in-law must do for her in-laws? Based upon what you said, it's temporary because you don't have your own place. If it's causing so much difficulty, then your husband has a duty to try and ensure that you have somewhere else to stay, where you have some privacy, where you have some space, especially, as you mentioned, other non-mahrams, especially away from other non-mahrams, like your brother-in-laws and other extended family members. You have no... The Prophet said, Al-hamu maut, said in-laws are death. And the reference being to in-laws that are ghayr mahram, where they're treated as though they're the same as your own family, but they're not. They're not. In-laws are death. Sadaqa Rasulullah. So it's a duty upon your husband to provide somewhere for you where you're able to fulfill, or where you're not falling into the haram of being around ghayr mahram, even though they're family members. And where you're protected to a degree from the problems that you mentioned. To a degree, because the truth is that it's a struggle of marriage. Right? There are always problems between husband and wife, problems between parents and children, problems between yourselves and families and so on. Right? And there is no utopian smooth marriage. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So, but it has to be to a level that's manageable. Right? If it's breaking a person, then there's clearly something wrong. The duty that a daughter-in-law has towards her in-laws is that she honors them, she respects them, she treats them like they not just treats them, they are her second father and mother. They're mahram. وهو الذي خلق من الماء بشرا فجعله نسبا وصهرا وكان ربك قديرا. He's the one who created from water, from liquid, all human beings, and he made them into nasab and sihr. He made them into biological ties and in-law ties. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human society that you come out of your family and then you get married and then you extend your family. So your father and mother-in-law, even if let's say for example the husband dies and she's now a widow, the father-in-law is always his father, mother-in-law is always mother-in-law. They will never stop being. They are your second father and mother. So you should not see them as someone else. You should see them as your father and as your mother. But so legally, there's no obligation to obey, but they are your second father and mother. They should be honored and respected as your own father and mother. Your obedience is to your father and your mother. But respect and honor is to both sets of parents. Wallahu a'lam. النبي خير الأنام عمر. وعليكم السلام. Please can you explain why is it a major sin to cut off family ties, and what can one do about managing bad-mannered extended family members? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us all from the rahim, from the womb. The womb is what bonds us together. Right? The family is about the womb. It's the womb of your mother that ties you all together. So once you begin to break off ties, you're breaking off the connections that go back to your father and mother. So through your father and mother, Allah has created a network that's your family. Doesn't matter how bad they are. They could even be kafir, non-Muslim. But you're from the same womb. You're from the same womb, the womb of your mother, from which you came forth. And so that's why it's such a major sin. That Allah has created you from the same, and you're going to break those ties that He subhanahu wa ta'ala created you with. So whatever happens, don't break family ties. Especially father and mother. It doesn't matter what they do to you. It doesn't matter what your father and mother do to you, don't break family ties. Extended family, start with siblings onwards, like brothers and sisters onwards. Extended family, likewise, they're your family. They're your family, so you respect them, honor them. You don't boycott them. You don't stop speaking to them. But if they're causing difficulty, then you don't get stung. You don't be naive. You don't go out of your way to keep on exposing yourself to harm from somebody who keeps on harming you. But at the same time, you don't cut ties. You'll give them salams. You meet them when you need to meet them, and so on. Majid Yas, Majid Mahmoud Mufti, opinion on Black Lives Matter. من قتل نفسا كأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. Whoever kills a human life, it's as though he's killed all of humanity. And whoever preserves a life, it's as though he's preserved all of humanity. Life is sacred with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Life is sacred with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And especially when that life is being targeted for nothing other than skin color, which is one of the great miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم, the differences in your languages and in your colors, one of the great miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إنك امرؤ فيك جاهلية. When Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, when he made a racist comment against Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, Ibn al-Sawda, O son of a black woman. And Sayyidina Bilal was upset by that. The Prophet's nice, and he says to Sayyidina Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, أنت امرؤ فيك جاهلية. You're a man who has still some ignorance with him. African Americans, Palestinians in Israel, anybody who's been oppressed and downtrodden, مستضعفين في الأرض. All lives matter. All human lives matter. All human lives matter. And all people should be honored and respected. All people should be honored and respected. And such evil should be condemned in the strongest of all terms, the most powerful of all language, and whatever it takes to stop that. Like people are protesting, people are out on the streets and so on. Whatever it takes to stop such evil, it should be done. Wallahu a'lam. La ilaha illallah. Anonymous, I'm just looking through different questions. An anonymous attendee. Wa alaykum salam. I have my father who is arrogant and teaches me to look down on people and refuses my marriage proposal. Also, I have helped with his businesses, and my mother or brothers have not got any provision from my dad and has not fulfilled our rights. What is the best thing to do to get my dad to change his mindset? Change your mindset is the hardest of all things to do. And once a person is set in his ways, it's so difficult to change a person's mindset. So when people are so, and it's based on what you said, if a person is so arrogant and even you're being affected by that it may even pass on to you, and it teaches you to look down on other people and so on. it's going to be difficult for you to change that. And what you do to change his mindsets, raise your hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in terms of you, it's about how you cope with that. Because, as we just said before, you cannot break those ties. Doesn't matter how arrogant your father is, your father. You cannot break those ties. But protect yourself from that. You will be affected by some of that. And even subconsciously, without realizing it, you are always picking up traits of those who are closest to you, especially father and mother. So look into yourself just to make sure that you're breaking that out of yourself. So he's teaching you to be arrogant towards others. Then make sure you always remind yourself that when you're dealing with people, that person's better than me. It doesn't matter who it is, that person's better than me. And I'm a person who's laden with sin. I do wrong all the time. Refusing a marriage proposal is a bit more tricky. Because the father's meant to be a filter. The father's meant to be a filter. The role of the father in marriage is that he's a filter to try and find, to remove the worst options, try and find the best option for his daughter. زوج بنتك التقي. Hassan al-Basri, he said, marry your daughter to a righteous person. إن أحبها أكرمها وإن كرهها لم يظلمها. If he loves her, he will honor her. And if he dislikes her, he will not wrong her. That's the duty of the father. And I think this is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, any father who marries his daughter to a fasiq is the one who's cut family ties with her. So a father who marries his daughter to a known sinner, and a person who commits haram, he's the one who's broken ties with her. So every woman should know that she has the right to marry. The father's there to help and aid and assist in the process. But she has the right to marry. So then it depends upon to what extent you're willing to deal with this. If you want to get married and he's a good, decent person, everybody else is happy, and your father's refusing just because he does not see that he's worthy of you and so on, you have the right to marry. If he's from Sahib al-Kafa, if he meets certain criteria, then even without the father's approval, you have the right to marry. On the view of Abu Hanifa, the view of the majority says that, of most Imams, says that the wali, without permission of the guardian, then the marriage is invalid. Abu Hanifa says as long as kafa is met, as long as certain criteria are met, and that those criteria are studied, then a woman can marry. So it depends upon yourself then, like, to what extent you want to go with that. Wallahu a'lam. Umair, mashallah, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If a person entered a place where there was a fire due to potential danger whilst fasting, would the inhalation of smoke break the fast in this incident? No, it wouldn't. For the simple reason, if there's a fire going on there, you wouldn't have entered unless there was a reason to do so. As a rule, if you inhale smoke, it'll only break your fast if it was unavoidable. So why have you gone into a place where there's fire? So it must have been, for example, to get out if there's an exit there, or for example, to help somebody pull somebody out of there. In that case, inhaling smoke wouldn't break. Wallahu a'lam. Follow on to the question, prior to my question also, my dad thinks it's okay to have off license and give wealth to his brothers and sisters, but not to his own wife and kids. Alhamdulillah, you should say, Alhamdulillah, he's not giving it to you, to the wife and kids. If his wealth has come from haram, Alhamdulillah, that you've not been exposed to it. MashaAllah. Okay, anonymous attendee says, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. How can we say you are right and your teachers are on the path of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, or other people like Mufti Mank and Ustad Nu'man Ali Khan, who people say to avoid, apologize for coming across rude? Just a genuine question. The way of Ahlus Sunnah is clear. The way of Ahlus Sunnah is clear. The followers, or often in terms of preservation of the way of Ahlus Sunnah, it's clear. So if it's about they're saying we're from Ahlus Sunnah, we're saying we're from Ahlus Sunnah, and others saying we're from Ahlus Sunnah, then go and explore. Go and explore. And what exactly defines Ahlus Sunnah? And see, do they match up? Who matches up and who does not match up? And in the end, tawakkal ala Allah. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to turn your heart towards people of true guidance and turn your heart away from people of misguidance, however appealing the way may sound. What do you do if a sheikh / mufti, etc. has been accused of doing something wrong? How should we deal with such things? It depends on the nature of the wrong and whether it affects his teaching, his da'wah, and so on. Was it just a genuine mistake, or was it an abusive position? If it's a genuine mistake and he's made tawbah from that, then continue to take from him, because nobody is a saint at the highest level, or nobody's sinless. So even the best of all may well slip. But if it's something a bit more dangerous and dark than that, abuse of power in terms of, for example, male teachers with females and so on, then you have to be a lot more cautious about that and raise question marks about it. There should be a protective network around that shit, because shuyukh don't work as individuals. Like it's something that the body of scholarship around should address and deal with. Or people should be warned about such people, and people should be careful. If somebody didn't transform in Ramadan, what can be done now? Transformation is a slow process. When you say that someone didn't transform in Ramadan, right, change little bits. It's a slow process. You evolve in your religion. It's not radical, wholesale change. That's usually very damaging within a person. So if Ramadan's come out and the change of Ramadan is a change after Ramadan. You've done all the great works that you've done in Ramadan, but what have you taken after Ramadan? That's where the change comes in. So now Ramadan's gone. It's been a few weeks. Are you still reading some Qur'an? Still giving some sadaqah? Have you changed something about your behavior? Look at one or two key points. Hold firmly onto them. Shazay, mashallah. Shazay, we're meant to be having this session in your house, mate. How do we respond to the mutashabbiha when they claim Imam al-Tahawi used the word fawq to describe God as being above? We respond that Imam al-Tahawi himself says, Ta'ala anil hudud wal jihad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond directions and boundaries. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not described by direction and boundaries. So Imam al-Tahawi himself, he says that. He says, وَهُوَ مُسْتَوٍ عَلَى عَرْشِهِ. Imam al-Tahawi says that he's established on his throne, and so they're going to take that as that he's above the foot. وَمَا دُونَهُ. And he's independent. مُسْتَغْنٍ عَنِ الْعَرْشِ وَمَا دُونَهُ. Imam al-Tahawi says he has no need for the throne and everything beneath it. So they're now going to confirm actual directions as being above in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say, are you going to answer that? Imam al-Tahawi says, Ta'ala anil hudud wal jihad. Allah is beyond directions and he's beyond having boundaries. So we would then say, the way of Ahlus Sunnah, particularly the mutaakhirin, the later Imams of Ahlus Sunnah, nu'awwil, fawqa al-makan la makan. We say that he's above in terms of status and rank and not in direction. And if the mutashabbiha say we don't do ta'wil, we don't interpret, we say the Salaf did that. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he interpreted three of the descriptions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Yaminullah, that the black stone is the hand of Allah. He interpreted that. The Salaf, the Ibn Abbas interpreted Maji'ullah. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا, like your Lord comes, your Lord comes. Mentioned clearly in the books of Tafsir, Ibn Abbas says the judgment of your Lord comes. Not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually moving in a direction. So we interpret it. We interpret it having rejected completely direction in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. نمشي على طريق الخلف وبعض السلف. So we understand it in the way of most of the laters and some of the earlies. Anonymous attendees asking the question, Maghrib's coming in now, so we have a few minutes left, inshallah ta'ala. Can you do wudu without wearing a top or having awra covered? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. There's no shart, there's no condition of wudu that you, theoretically, Hamza Quddus, Hamza Quddus, the man who loves to move around with his hairy knees showing all the time. Theoretically, if you were naked and you did wudu is valid, but it may not be the best etiquette. It may not be it isn't the best etiquette, but your wudu is valid. So it's not a requirement for the validity of your wudu that you be covered, but it's more an issue of adab. Okay, so Saqib sent a question from Khurshid saying, MashaAllah, Khurshid, MashaAllah. We're going to be on, just to let you all know, inshallah, tomorrow with the Study Qur'ān. We're going to do also Q&A. That's on Muslim hands. That's from 7 till 8 tomorrow. So inshallah, we'll be speaking to our husband, Study Qur'ān, tomorrow. So our question, can I pay zakat monthly through the year and then add on an extra on the day my zakat is due if I need to pay more? Yes, for the Hanafis, that's valid, that's allowed. Because for the Hanafis, you're allowed to pay a zakat in advance, so you can set it up at monthly payments and then add it up at the end of the year on your zakat and then check what you actually had to pay on your date and then top up whatever you're short on. You can do that if it's in advance. You should not do that if you're delaying it. So if you're setting up monthly installments for the year that's gone, you cannot do that because it's sinful to delay your payment of zakat. Hajra, asking too much. Slight digression from the halal and haram. Shaykh, please can you do tafsir classes on the entire Quran in Arabic? We're doing that on Skype, and you're part of that class. I don't know what you're talking about, but in those classes we're taking all the time. So we got to was around verse 70 odd in Surah Al Imran. We've been doing that for about 3 or 4 years. So inshallah, we're doing that, and in about 30 years' time we'll finish it. Bi-idhnillah. Shazib, like you want to battle the deviants, don't you? Just a couple more. When making up prayers, should they be done from the last prayer you remember missing, going back to the age you hit puberty? Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. And if you're not sure of when that was, like for a female, she can't remember when she had the first period. For a male, can't remember when he had the first wet dream, for example. Then say you go back to the early stage for a boy, the first boy, 12 years old, the earliest. For a girl, 9 years old. Wallahu a'lam. If one feels that Deen should take priority and one should fully delve into Deen, is it better to quit our jobs, etc., and study full-time, dars nizam, etc.? وَلِكُلٍّ وِجْهَةٌ هُوَ مُوَلِّيهَا فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Everyone has a direction that he's turning towards. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. So hasten and rush towards, compete with each other to get towards goodness. Deen should definitely take priority. But to dedicate your life completely to it, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens that up for certain select people. If you're able to do that, quit your job and then you want to engage in or you want to go into the path of scholarship, then absolutely. But service of religion is not just in knowledge. There are so many different ways you can serve religion whilst you're doing your 9-to-5 job. So definitely Deen should always take priority. And if you want to become, like, in the real sense, a true servant of religion in every sense of the word, then if you're able to quit your job and then immerse yourself completely in studying knowledge with the intention of serving the Ummah of the Prophet, there's nothing more beautiful than that. But don't forget, whatever you're doing in life, serve the Deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shazaib, mashallah, you want to wage war. Come back into the Aqidah class, and that's where we'll discuss these. قال الإمام الطحاوي رحمه الله تعالى والعرش والكرسي حق ومستغن على عرش ما دونه محيط بكل شيء وفوقه وقد عجز عن الحاط خلقه. قال مجاهد استوى على العرش. قال الفراث ثم استوى صعد. قال ابن عباس رضي الله عنه. طيب إن شاء الله we need to reference these points. Wallahu a'lam. Need to reference these points, but that's not. No. Many women claim that the man should do the household chores. The work should be split 50-50 between the man and women. Is this Islamic? No, it's not. But is it Islamic for the woman to have to do the household chores? It's not an obligation upon her either. So who does it? If you're talking about splitting the chores, if you're talking about as an obligation, it's not her obligation, it's not his obligation. Her obligation in her marriage is not to refuse her husband sexually. That's her obligation. After that, in terms of clearing the house and so on, it's her duty as part of religion, but not a legal obligation. So she does maintain the home, and the husband helps, as the Prophet ﷺ did, but it's not a 50-50 split. The husband's obligation, he goes out, he works, puts food on the table. That's his obligation. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We're into Maghrib time now, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to have, we had a little discussion before. So inshallah, we're going to do this every fortnight because people have many questions, and we'll try and inshallah the Rawdah Trust, we just asked you perhaps just to save these questions. In 2 weeks' time, we'll have another session, and we're going to keep on doing this every 2 weeks, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا, all of you. ربي زدنا علما. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase in knowledge and to keep us with the true people of knowledge who are real guides to Allah and His Messenger. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.